You're watching Sky News Today. Coming up, a new study says that Britain is less caring than a decade ago. We're going to be asking, do we really care? Welcome back. Now, new research has found that almost 2 out of 3 people in Britain think that the country has become less caring. Of the more than 2,000 adults that were surveyed by the charity Action for Happiness, the majority said that the country was less compassionate than it was a decade ago.
Well, the study found that some of the top indicators of an individual's level of compassion were being under the age of 35, living with 3 or more people, and voting Remain in the EU referendum.
Well, joining us now is Mark Williamson. He's from Action for Happiness. It's the charity that conducted the research. A very warm welcome to you. I'm disappointed you're not wearing Christmas jumper. We're talking about Christmas jumpers. You've become appropriately attired there. How on earth do you measure this? How on earth do you measure how compassionate we are as a society?
Yes, good question. So this study has taken a well-known, validated sort of scientific measure of compassion that tries to tease out the sort of 2 components of that. One is this idea of feeling concern for someone else, that sort of empathic interest in someone else's position. But then, crucially, compassion is about acting on that. So this survey, that's called the Clara Compassion Scale, uses 5 questions to help understand people's attitudes and views. And what this research has done today is to try to say, well, what can we learn from this when we look at all the different factors in the UK? So how does it differ with age, gender, voting, as you mentioned, and household situation? And there's some really interesting and perhaps slightly surprising findings that come out of this research.
Tell us some of the most surprising indicators, then.
Well, I think one of the first things to notice is some of the things that don't matter in terms of predicting compassion and kindness. So we might assume that things like our income, our education, our sort of where we live, some of these factors would have a role. In fact, actually, none of those really come out as significant at all. But there are 4 main categories that do seem to matter. One is our gender, one is our politics, one is
who's the more
with.
Compassionate gender? Just for the
Yes, so let's for the record, the research would show that women are, on average, more compassionate than men. And on one level, that's maybe no surprise, but on another level, at a time when we're seeing, for example, women being bullied out of politics with all the kind of toxic environment, it's another reminder of how vital it is that we have more women in positions of influence across society.
It's very interesting that you say that income is not really a determinant in this, because you've measured it and said, actually, we're less caring than we were a decade ago. And you could think about that and think, well, we've had austerity for most of that time. So has that impacted on the way we think societally? But if you're saying income doesn't matter, then has it had an impact or not?
I don't know, because this research doesn't say for definite, but I feel that we've been sort of almost sleepwalking unconsciously into a sort of less kind society, partly fueled by the sort of toxicity in our public debate, partly with, you know, online trolling and various trends that I think have made us see the fear of the other rather than our common humanity. The reason we're publishing this today is that Action for Happiness believes that compassion is vital for our society to flourish, and it's something that really matters to us as human beings, and it's a core British value, actually, caring for each other. So the fact that people feel as though it's on decline is really worrying, something we should act on.
Do you believe there's a link, then, between kindness and happiness? So these young women under 35 who voted Remain, who are the most compassionate, are they therefore also the happiest?
Well, there is definitely a lot of research that shows that when we're kind to others, it's good for our own well-being too. And our mission with the charity is really to promote national well-being, and that is, of course, caring about each other, not just about ourselves. This study didn't look specifically at happiness, and I should add that those factors you mentioned are sort of independent, so it's not just female Remain voting, people who live together. But they're all independent
factors. Out of this.
Yes.
We're like, thank goodness we've got a non-Brexit interview, and then you go and bring it up again.
Oh, well, we're just reporting the data that came out. But I think because there's, rather surprisingly to us, found that some of these voting habits do link to our values, actually. I think what it seems to show is that when we are making these choices, we should be primed by our values and try to elect a society and build a world that is more compassionate and encourages that more.
This gets talked about sometimes. Should happiness be a sort of official measure? I think is it Bhutan, I think, where it is an official measure there. I mean, should we just be looking at GDP and all those other things, or should we be looking at the level of happiness in the country? And how does the UK compare?
So the UK doesn't compare particularly favourably. It does relative to a lot of developing countries. But there are a lot of other countries, like the Northern European, Scandinavian countries, that are on average much happier. I think it's hugely important. If we prioritise well-being, it wouldn't be to the detriment of our health or our economy. It would actually enhance all those things. So there are countries like New Zealand and others that now have a budget based on well-being that says it's not just GDP, folks. It's also mental health, it's communities, it's relationships, it's friendships. So that's really why this compassion report is so important. It reminds us there's more to life than just economic success. It's about caring for each other.
Yeah, that's why I asked, are you a happy chap and working for Action for Happiness?
Like all human beings, I have my times of unhappiness and sorrow and challenges, but generally I'm an optimistic person, and I do believe in the goodness of human nature and that we do care about each other. We just sometimes live in a culture that doesn't really enhance that.
It costs nothing, doesn't it? It costs nothing to be kind.
Well, yes, I wish you'd lived by that more often. We'll leave it there, shall we? All right, Mark Williamson, really good to have you in the studio. Thank you very much. Indeed, she's not going to let me forget that now.
You guys judge for yourself who's being kind here today. Let's take a look at the weather forecast now.